Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to discuss Delta credit cards. So recently, Delta just added higher elevated offers to their American Express credit cards. So if you happen to be someone who is interested in flying with Delta flights, this can end up being a great time to get yourself one of these Delta credit cards. Now, Delta typically does this at least once, maybe even a couple times each year, but it's always good to get these cards when these elevated offers are out there. And since there are elevated offers on these credit cards right now, I thought it would end up being a great time to go over the Delta credit cards, the Delta Miles and its program, and then also my problems with the Delta Miles and their program, and then some secret sweet spots that actually end up being with the miles that you may not know about. I'm gonna go over all of those, but first, let's break down the Delta credit card. So the first Delta credit card we're gonna be looking at is going to be the Delta Gold card. This card currently has an elevated offer of giving you 60,000 Delta miles after you end up spending $2,000 in the first 6 months of having this card. This card does have a $99 annual fee, but it's actually ended up being waived in the first year, which is absolutely awesome. Now, when it comes to earning potential for this card, you get 2x back on Delta flights, also 2x back on restaurants and on grocery stores, and then you end up getting yourself 1x back on all the purchases. Some additional perks you end up getting with this card is going to be your first check bag free, you're going to get priority boarding, no foreign transaction fees, and then also 20% off in-flight purchases. The second card we're going to look at is going to be the Delta Platinum card. Now, this card currently has an elevated sign-up bonus of giving you 85,000 Delta SkyMiles after you end up spending $4,000 in the first 6 months of having this card. Now, this card has a $250 annual fee that is not waived in the first year. And when it comes to earning potential with this card, you get 3x back on Delta flights, 3x back at hotels, 2x back at supermarkets, 2x back at dining, and then 1x back on all the purchases. You can also earn 10,000 qualifying medallion miles after you spend $25,000 in a calendar year with this card. Now, this card also gives you your first check bag free, priority boarding, no foreign transaction fees, 20% off in-flight purchases, but additionally, with this card, you can get yourself access to the Delta Sky Club. It is gonna cost you $50 for a visit, but you do have the ability to actually go with this card as compared to you don't actually have it with the Delta Gold card. And the best perk of this card is you get yourself a companion pass for an economy flight within the lower 48 states. So there is going to be taxes and fees added onto it, but you end up getting yourself a round trip companion pass for a taxes and fees. I believe it's somewhere near about $100 or like $80, but this ends up being really good value if you happen to have a companion, such as like a play or two that you know you're gonna be flying on a Delta flight with. You're gonna get yourself some good value for this companion ticket. It can definitely offset that annual fee if you end up using this throughout the year. And then the last card is going to be the Delta Reserve card. This card has an elevated offer of giving you 85,000 Delta Sky Miles after you end up spending $6,000 in the first 6 months of having this card. So it's actually gonna be the same amount of miles you would get with the Delta Platinum card, however, it's gonna be more spend that's gonna be required. Now, this card has a $550 annual fee, and when it comes to earning potential with this card, you get 3x back on Delta flights, and then 1x back on all the purchases. So when it comes to earner cards, this is definitely the worst card out of them. However, this card does actually have some more perks and benefits that connect with it that can make it make sense for some people. So for instance, if you happen to be looking for Delta status, with this card, you can get yourself 15,000 qualified medallion miles for every $30,000 spent, and you can do this 4 times throughout the year. Also with this card, you're gonna get yourself priority boarding, first check bag free, no foreign transaction fees, 20% off in-flight purchases, and you also get access to the Delta Sky Club when you're flying with Delta, and also with the Centurion Lounge if also you're flying with Delta as well. You get 2 one-time guest passes annually to the Delta Sky Club, and then after that ends up being $50 per guest you want to bring with you into the Delta Sky Club. And just like the Delta Platinum card, the Delta Reserve card has a companion pass connected to it. The big difference is that instead of it only being an economy flight, the Delta Reserve card has the ability to go all the way up to a first class flight. As long as the original flight was booked in first class, the companion can be in first class as well. Now, when you look at these 3 elevated offers, in my opinion, the Delta Gold card ends up being the best one. And the reason for this is because you end up having the annual fee waived in the first year. So you end up getting that 65,000 Delta Sky Miles without even having to worry about paying American Express anything. Whereas even though you end up getting yourself more Delta Sky Miles with the Delta Platinum card or the Delta Reserve card, you have to pay $250 or $550 to end up getting those additional miles. So if you end up looking at the additional miles of being 20,000 more miles, but then ends up costing you $250 $100 more. If you end up valuing Delta SkyMiles at around 1.4 to 1.5 cents per point in value, you are going to be coming out a little bit ahead, but in my opinion, I'd rather just not even have to think about the annual fee. While I may be able to come out slightly ahead, maybe about $30 to $40 in value, I still have to make sure that I end up getting those exact flights coming in at about 1.5 cents per point in value to actually justify it. There's a chance I could actually end up booking a flight that might be slightly under, which will end up making it pretty much the exact same value as the Gold card, except for with the Gold card, I don't have to worry about even doing the math to actually make sure I'm actually getting what is considered reasonable value for Delta SkyMiles. And then when it comes to the Delta Reserve card, the only real reason to actually get this card is because of the fact that you want to get yourself Delta status. So if you are someone who is seeking status and you fly a lot with Delta, then it can actually make sense to get yourself the Delta Reserve card. But if you want to get yourself access to like the Delta Sky Club or even just the Centurion Lounge, it doesn't make any sense to get this card for those reasons, because if you actually end up getting yourself something like the American Express Platinum card, you can get yourself access to the Delta Sky Club if you happen to be flying with Delta and have the American Express Platinum card, or you get yourself access to the Centurion Lounge regardless of which airline you're flying with, just as long as you end up having that American Express Platinum card in your wallet. Now, one great thing that Delta did add on to these credit cards is that you're gonna get yourself a 15% discount with Delta flights when you actually have these cards when you're redeeming your Delta miles. So this is actually where you can end up getting yourself closer to about 1.5 cents per point in value. Typically, I believe Delta miles would end up being closer to like 1.3, but getting that additional 15% will boost it up closer to 1.5 and will definitely end up making a lot of sense to have these cards if you happen to be a frequent Delta flyer, because you're gonna end up getting yourself more value for your miles. But the big thing to know about Delta miles is that they're actually some of the weakest miles in the points and miles game. And the reason for that is because Delta goes off of dynamic pricing, which ends up meaning that the cost of the ticket determines what the cost of the actual amount of miles is going to be for that flight. So if Delta SkyMiles are going to end up being worth about 1.5 cents per point in value, that would mean that if you end up looking at a ticket that costs $1,500, this will end up costing you 100,000 Delta SkyMiles. And the Delta SkyMiles are going to move based off of what the actual ticket cost is going to end up being. This also goes for the Delta partners when you end up flying with them as well. So this is the reason why if you actually end up looking at international business class and first class flights using Delta SkyMiles, they end up being an insane amount of miles, because the price of the amount of miles is just moving with the price of the actual ticket cost. But if you look at other programs such as American Airlines Miles, Alaskan Airlines Miles, or even like United Miles, what ends up happening is that there is an award chart, or there ends up being a Saver Award availability. So what this ends up meaning is that if you actually want to fly over to Japan from Los Angeles in first class using American Airlines miles, since they are partnered with Japan Airlines, if you actually can find Saver Award availability, then what's going to end up happening is it's only going to cost you 80,000 American Airlines miles, even though the ticket cost for something like the first class flight on Japan Airlines end up being like $13,000 or $14,000 for that one way. This is the reason why people in the points and miles game love award charts and also having these different Saver Award availabilities. You're going to get yourself some incredible value for your points. You don't have to worry about if the ticket cost ends up going up, needing more miles for that exact same flight. However, even though Delta SkyMiles may end up having less value for the specific type of international business and first class flights, the thing that you actually will be able to get good use value for them is going to end up being for domestic economy flights. So if you happen to be flying out of Atlanta and flying on domestic flights, pretty much everywhere you end up going, you know that if you actually end up getting yourself 100,000 Delta SkyMiles, you are still going to be able to get yourself somewhere between about $1,300 to $1,500 in Delta flights. So this is definitely still valuable. It just ends up not being able to give you those luxury YOLO trips that many people in the points and miles game wish to take. Now, while I do think that these elevated offers can be quite valuable, and if you happen to frequently fly with Delta, it can make a lot of sense to jump on them, I do actually have some issue with the Delta credit cards. And the issue I have with the Delta credit cards is that their earning potential is just not very strong. Yes, you may end up looking at it and going, well, I'm getting 2x back with Delta flights, or maybe 3x back with Delta flights, and then you end up looking at some other airline credit cards that have somewhat similar earning potential. The problem ends up being that American Express has other credit cards within their program that allow you to earn similar earnings, if not better. So if you actually end up looking at all the other charge cards with American Express, you're going to be getting yourself at least 3x back when you end up looking at the American Express Green Card and the Gold Card with flights booked with Delta or booked with any airline. And then with the American Express Platinum Card, you're going to get yourself 5x back on flights booked with Delta or with any airline. And the reason why this ends up being a problem is because you can actually earn the exact same amount of miles, except for you just don't have to transfer them over to Delta. The challenge with the Delta miles, earning them with Delta, is that they are stuck in the Delta program. But when you end up earning these with your green card, your gold card, or your platinum card, you're actually going to have the ability to transfer them over to Delta or transfer them over to any one of the other many partners that connect with American Express. Now, I'm well aware that there is going to be a transfer bonus when you actually end up transferring over to Delta when it comes to your membership reward points. There ends up being like a tax that you have to pay. So it definitely can end up taking down the value when it comes to transferring over your membership reward points over to Delta. However, the fact that you don't actually have to transfer them over to Delta ends up making the membership reward points stronger. And then the ability to be able to book with any airline and be able to get yourself at least 3x back on flights ends up making these cards just a lot better. And even if you were to add in that tax that comes with transferring over your membership reward points to Delta, if you happen to have the American Express Platinum card, you're still going to be earning more and get yourself better value than you would if you end up having something like the Delta Reserve card. Having a transferable currency is definitely stronger than having points or miles stuck in one specific program. I honestly would rather have 100,000 membership reward points than have 150,000 Delta SkyMiles. Heck, I might even do 100,000 membership reward points over 200,000 Delta SkyMiles. That's how much more valuable I find membership reward points over Delta SkyMiles. A good way to end up thinking about it would end up being, would you rather $1,000 in cash, or would you rather a gift card to Chipotle ends up being $1,500? Would you rather $1,000 in cash, or would you rather $2,000 gift card to Chipotle? At some point, you might end up seeing that the Chipotle gift card will end up definitely making more sense for you, but the $1,000 in cash, you know that there's so much more stuff you can end up doing with it that you don't need to be stuck just specifically with Chipotle. Even though you actually may end up liking Chipotle, you would probably prefer to end up getting yourself $1,000 in cash than the $1,500 to Chipotle. And also, many Delta flights can actually end up being booked with Virgin Atlantic miles for significantly less miles than what Delta is asking for. Virgin Atlantic is a transfer partner of American Express, so this is just another example of why having membership reward points can end up being more valuable than having Delta SkyMiles. Now, even though you end up getting yourself this fixed value for your Delta flights throughout the United States, there is a few ways to actually get yourself some sweet spots to get yourself higher than normal value for your Delta SkyMiles. If you actually want to fly in business class using your Delta SkyMiles and not have to pay somewhere near about 400,000 Delta SkyMiles, the way to do that would actually end up being to redeem your Delta SkyMiles for flights that don't actually touch the US. So what I mean by that is that if you happen to want to fly from Mexico over to Amsterdam, you actually can end up doing this for, I believe it ends up being like 75,000 Delta SkyMiles in business class one way. If you were to look at a flight from like JFK over to Amsterdam in business class, you're looking at something that's end up being closer to like 400,000 Delta SkyMiles. So you actually end up saving yourself a significant amount more miles, and this also actually ends up being a longer flight. The challenge ends up being that you have to find flights that don't actually touch the US. So if you're gonna happen to find different flights that are part of SkyTeam that don't actually touch the United States, you can actually end up getting yourself some really good value for your points. Because this flight that ended up being 75,000 miles to go over to Amsterdam from Mexico would actually end up being close to like $3,000. So this means that with your Delta SkyMiles, you can get yourself over 3 cents per point in value with this flight, which actually ends up doubling the value of your Delta SkyMiles if you just make sure you don't end up touching the United States. Play around with Delta's websites for flights overseas. You'll actually see you're gonna get yourself better value than you would for your flights within the United States. And another way to get yourself good value for your Delta SkyMiles would actually be to buy high-end alcohol within the Delta Sky Club. So if you've ever been someone who wanted to buy a bottle of Dom Perignon for a special occasion, but you end up looking at the ticket price being somewhere in the mid 200s, you're thinking that there's no way you could ever spend that amount on a bottle of champagne. Well, if you actually end up using your Delta SkyMiles at the Delta Sky Club, you actually can get a bottle of Dom Perignon, I believe for 13,000 Delta SkyMiles. This ends up being close to about 2 cents per point in value as compared to what you get for a Delta flight with Delta Airlines, which can end up being somewhere near about 1.3 to 1.5 cents per point. Now, I know not everyone wants to ball out with a bottle of Dom Perignon, but it could make sense maybe just one time for a special occasion. This is the cheapest way that I can think of to get myself a high-end bottle of champagne. So who should get these cards and which cards should you get? Well, I think if you happen to be someone who frequently flies with Delta, it can just make a lot of sense to end up getting one of these cards. In my opinion, I think going with the Delta Gold card ends up making the most sense because of the fact you don't have to worry about that annual fee in the first year. The sign-up bonus is quite strong, coming in at 65,000 Delta SkyMiles, and then you actually end up getting yourself the free check bags and then also the other benefits that connect with that card. If you know you're going to get yourself a companion, you're going to be going with you at least one time throughout the year with a Delta economy flight in the lower 48 states, then it can make more sense to go with something like the Delta Platinum card. And then if only specifically you're gonna be going for Delta status, then that's the reason to get yourself the Reserve card. But if you're not going for status, then just don't go for the Reserve card, because in my opinion, it doesn't make any sense. If you want to get yourself access to the Delta Sky Club, then just get yourself the American Express Platinum card. You're gonna get more benefits from having that card, access to the Delta Sky Club, and also Centurion Lounge, regardless of which airline you're flying with. Honestly, when I look at these cards, I feel like these cards are almost set up to be churned because of the fact that I know you can end up getting yourself more earnings with something like the green card, the gold card, or the platinum card. So while I would usually tell people to look at cards they're gonna have for long-term use, if you're just looking at earning potential with these cards, they just really don't make any sense, because American Express has better cards that are gonna earn you more points that can be transferred to the exact same programs and also other programs to give you even more value for your points. But that's it. That's my breakdown of the elevated offers for the American Express Delta credit cards. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and let me know in the comment section down below if you happen to have any questions about the Delta credit cards. Now, if you happen to be interested in any of the Delta credit cards, I will have referral links in the description box. If you decide to use them, they will really help out the channel, and I'll be incredibly thankful for your support. And if you happen to really like this video, then please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Peace.